I've decided that my YouTube channel is clearly too popular, and I need to take steps to get it further deranked. That's why today, I'm going to talk about abortion. Before I start, I want to explain my position on morality. Not because I expect you to agree with me, but because it may be necessary to understand where I'm coming from with certain statements. I believe morality is objective. Unfortunately, as human beings, we view reality through the distorting lenses of our ignorance, biases, and emotions. Often it is easy for us to understand what is right and wrong. Other times, it verges on impossible to determine the what and the why of right and wrong. When it comes to abortion, regardless of what they believe, people tend to hold very strongly to weak positions that they don't understand well. So how can we come up with strong positions? I believe there are basically two relevant questions. First is, when does human life begin? I believe this is a relatively easy question to answer. As far as I'm concerned, the only honest answer here is at the point during the first cell division where DNA is combined. At that point, you have an organism with unique human DNA. It's no longer genetically part of the mother or father, and it is now on the natural course of a human life. The common conservative position that life begins at conception, i.e. an egg with a sperm cell inside it is a human life, seems somewhat arbitrary to me, although I will admit it has some merit as the point of divergence between the normal life cycle of egg and sperm cells and the path that leads to human life. The mainstream progressive position, which is that humanity is conferred when fetal development reaches a stage they identify as human, is puzzling. One would hope that progressives would find the idea of judging someone's humanity based on their appearance to be horrifying. Speaking of horrifying, the position of nearly all science-embracing progressive politicians is that the female reproductive system produces a magical humanity suppression field, and humanity is achieved by fully escaping said field. Can you imagine anything more deranged than claiming that motherhood begins with the suppression of humanity? I encourage you to put a pin in the idea of when human life begins and think more for yourself about it. The second relevant question is, does being a human life innately grant you rights? If not, what is it that gives you your rights? I'm honestly not sure on the second one, and it gets really weird when you look at the bigger picture. Most fertilized eggs fail to implant. Is using something like an IUD or the morning after pill to increase the implantation failure rate to near 100% killing someone? I'm honestly not sure. It's very inconvenient to say it's murder, but at first that seems to be an inescapable conclusion. On the other hand, normal dietary variants and lifestyle options as well as age affect the implantation rate. It would be ridiculous to say that having sex under anything other than the most ideal conditions is committing manslaughter, killing someone without deliberate action. Those arguments seem inevitably intertwined, so I wind up finding myself without a strong position. I would love to hear any sort of arguments on it. It's such a gray area that any argument I can come up with seems to be more a reflection of one bias or another than anything sound. Post-implantation, things clear up quite a bit. At that point, terminating the pregnancy is clearly the deliberate, unjustified taking of a human life, aka murder. I find it extremely difficult to take seriously any argument to the contrary. Development happens quickly and continuously, and it's just not practical that you aren't ending a human life or that there's some kind of objective point there that should define when human life or rights begin. Perhaps some are willing to argue that murder is acceptable in certain circumstances, maybe appealing to the authority that parents possess on behalf of their children, but I've yet to meet anyone willing to defend that position. There are two commonly accepted potential exceptions on abortion that I'd like to address. The first is, what about the life of the mother? I believe people who bring this up are almost always just looking for a loophole. I don't see it as any different than any other situation where it may be impossible to save the life of everyone involved. If you find two people in a burning car, you don't shoot one in the head before dragging the other out. You just do your best, and whatever happens, happens. Cases where it is impossible to save the life of a woman without killing her child are already extremely rare, and medical advances will only make them more so. I don't think it can reasonably be argued that access to medical technology changes the morality of an action. The second is, what about cases of rape? I think it's easiest to understand this by working your way backward. If your father were a rapist, would that in any way reduce or demean the humanity you possess today? And if you work backwards from today, is there any point at which that changes and you are somehow less human than someone who doesn't have a rapist for a father? This thought exercise should make it clear that parental consent is in fact irrelevant. Your rights do not depend on your parents, or anyone else for that matter, being okay with you having rights. Your humanity does not depend on anyone's willingness to acknowledge it. So there you have it, my take and/or lack thereof. I hope you found it thought-provoking. Let me know if it helps you think about your own position and where your arguments may need improvement.